Don't you dare tell anyone what really happened." Those were the first words my father spat at me as the flashing red and blue lights faded from our street. My mother's hand dug into my shoulder like a claw, her whisper venomous, "Your sister's future is gone because of you. My name is Emily. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a criminal in your own family?" I was 16 that night. My sister, Chloe, was pulled from the wreckage with a shattered leg and a broken future. Everyone said she'd been in the passenger seat. Everyone said I was the reason the car spun off the road. But I wasn't even behind the wheel. Still, in that chaos, my parents decided the story, and I was cast as the villain. They told neighbors I was reckless, told relatives I ruined Chloe's life. I swallowed the blame because what choice did I have? Their voices drowned me out, and soon, I started to believe it myself. The police filed their report, sealed it, handed it to my parents. I never saw it. My father locked it away like a weapon, hidden, waiting, and from that day forward, my life wasn't mine anymore. They drained my savings, saying it was for Chloe's medical bills. They forced me to work double shifts at the diner while Chloe rested at home, treated like porcelain. Every dollar I earned disappeared into their pockets. 9 years. 9 years of shame, guilt, and silent rage. But the truth has a way of clawing its way back, no matter how deep you bury it, and when it finally surfaced, it burned hotter than all their lies. 9 years is a long time to live in chains you didn't deserve. I worked while Chloe healed. Or rather, while Chloe lounged. I handed over paychecks, scrubbed dishes, and skipped college because family comes first. That's what my mother said, as if family meant sacrificing myself on their altar. The diner became my second home. Grease on my apron, tips in a jar that never stayed mine. My father came every Friday to collect. Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he thank me. He'd slide my envelope of cash into his jacket pocket and mutter, "This is the least you can do." The least. Meanwhile, Chloe played the role of victim flawlessly. She posted online about rebuilding her life, while I was the shadow in the background. Every like and comment praising her bravery cut me open, because I knew the cost of her comfort, me, and yet, I stayed silent. Because they told me the accident was my fault. That I ruined her. That I had to make it right. But one night, exhaustion cracked me open. I came home late, my clothes smelling of burnt coffee and fries. My parents were asleep. I heard a drawer creak in my father's study. And there it was, his locked metal file box, cracked open just enough that I don't know what pulled me to it. Maybe God. Maybe rage. My hands shook as I pulled out the manila folder labeled in thick black ink, "Police Report, 2012. I opened it, and in a single breath, 9 years of guilt unraveled, because the report didn't blame me. It named Chloe as the driver. Drunk. Reckless. Her blood alcohol level printed clear as day. The accident was hers. The blame was hers. And my parents had buried it, silenced me, and stolen 9 years of my life to protect their golden child. That I sat there with the paper trembling in my hands, tears streaking down my face. My voice cracked in the dark. "You ruined me." For the first time in 9 years, I felt something sharper than guilt. I felt fire, and fire doesn't stay contained. The next morning, I couldn't look at them the same. My parents sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had ever happened. Chloe scrolled on her phone, smirking at some comment about her being so strong. And me? I was holding their secret like a loaded gun. "Emily," my mother said, without looking up, "don't forget your paycheck today. Chloe needs her therapy session covered." Therapy. She hadn't gone in months. I knew it. They knew it. But they still demanded my life in dollars. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam the report in their faces. But instead, I swallowed the fury, folded the truth back into silence. Because revenge isn't about shouting. It's about timing. At work, I hid in the storage room during my break and read the report again, word by word. Chloe's BAC level. The officer's notes. Witness statements confirming she was behind the wheel. It was airtight. My whole life had been a lie, documented on 5 thin pages, and suddenly, I realized, I wasn't powerless anymore. I was holding their downfall in my hands, but rage without strategy is just noise. I wanted more than an apology. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, powerless, small, destroyed. So I started planning, first, I opened a secret savings account. Every tip, every spare dollar went there. No more envelopes for my father. I smiled and lied about slow nights at the diner while stashing away cash they'd never touch. Second, I began collecting proof. I took photos of the report, uploaded them to cloud storage under fake names. I wrote down every lie they'd told neighbors and family. My notes became a diary of betrayal, a blueprint for war. Third, I studied Chloe. Her arrogance was her weakness. She bragged about being the victim, soaked in sympathy, and strutted through life like she hadn't stolen mine. People loved her story. Which meant when it shattered, they'd watch the pieces fall. The thought made me smile for the first time in years. By the time I walked home that night, the rage in my chest had transformed. It wasn't a fire anymore. It was a storm, silent, gathering, waiting, and storms don't warn you before they hit. I learned quickly that revenge is a craft, not a tantrum. I started small, surgically. Chloe loved appearances, Instagram captions, brunch photos, the kind of charity gala where flashbulbs forgave sins. I began by seeding doubt, invisible at first, a private message from an anonymous account to a cousin. A carefully timed comment under a photo that hinted Chloe's nightlife, a whispered, "Did you know?" to the PDA moms who'd melted at her sob story. People nudged each other. Curiosity did the rest. Next, I weaponized logistics. I called Chloe's therapist, not to attack, but to ask about scheduling. Her weekly slot was gone. "Oh, she canceled months ago," the receptionist said, surprised. I wrote down the lie. I traced bank deposits labeled medical that routed through my parents' accounts. I photocopied receipts, screenshots, old tax forms. Every document was a nail. Then I used patience like armor. I let them think I was still beaten. I played the dutiful daughter at family dinners, letting guilt-sculpted smiles hang on my face like porcelain. At night I pored over the report until its edges were soft from handling. I memorized witness names, locations, times. I mapped the narrative they'd built and found the seams. I found Chloe's weakness: she loved credit more than truth. She had interviews lined up where being the brave survivor would net her sponsorships, a speaking tour, donations. I began to whisper precise facts to the right ears: journalists who covered small-town scandals. An investigator who owed me a favor from my college days. A lawyer who smelled fraud the way some people smell rain. I described, with clinical calm, the contradictions between the public story and the sealed report. I let the seeds germinate, then I struck a practical blow. I filed a request for the police report under my own name, invoking rights I'd never used. The clerk asked questions I answered in neutral tones. Paperwork went in. A date was set. My hands trembled, then steadied. I imagined the moment they would see my name tied to the file, the recognition that I, the accused, had taken custody of the truth. But the sharpest move wasn't legal or public. It was intimate. I delivered a copy of the report to Chloe's inbox with no subject line, just the document attached. I watched through a window as her fingers hovered over the screen. She opened it. Her face changed like a stage light going cold. When she surfaced, she wasn't shocked, she was scared, and fear looks uglier than deceit. My parents, sensing the shift, tried to salvage control with force and gaslight. They denied, raged, rewrote facts. But the town began to murmur in halves and fragments. That night, as I lay awake listening to the house creak, I realized I had not only exposed a crime, they had exposed themselves by trying to bury it. The roof they built over their lies was thin. All it took was a single truth to let rain in, and rain. The morning after I sent Chloe that report, the house felt different. Silence thickened the air, heavy, brittle, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. My father's voice finally broke it at breakfast. "You went too far, Emily." His jaw was tight, eyes bloodshot. Too far? 9 years of slavery under their roof, and I was the one who crossed the line? My mother pushed her plate away, untouched. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You'll ruin this family." I laughed, soft, sharp, dangerous. "What family?" Chloe stared at me like I was a loaded gun, her phone clutched in her hand as if the truth might leak through the screen. She didn't speak. Not yet. She was waiting, calculating, like she always did when she thought someone else might take the fall for her. But this time, I wasn't falling. That evening, whispers started leaking. A journalist friend called me, voice buzzing with curiosity. Emily, this report you mentioned, it checks out. Why hasn't this ever been public? Because my parents buried it, I said. And just like that, a story began to take shape, one louder than all their lies. Within days, I watched cracks spiderweb through their perfect facade. My father's coworkers started asking questions. My mother's church circle gave her sharp glances instead of sympathy. And Chloe? She received an email from a charity pulling out of her fundraiser, citing conflicting information. But my favorite moment came on a Sunday afternoon. My parents tried to confront me in the living room, cornering me like they always had. "You'll retract this," my father demanded, fists trembling. I didn't flinch. I pulled out the folder, the original report, and laid it on the coffee table between us. "Retract the truth?" I said. "No. Not anymore." For a long moment, nobody moved. The house we'd lived in for years, the house where I was branded guilty, felt like it was holding its breath. Then my mother lunged for the folder, but I was faster. I slipped it back into my bag, zipped it shut, and slung it over my shoulder. "You don't own me anymore," I told them. "You don't own this story either." Their faces twisted, a mixture of rage and fear. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. They were scared of me, and fear, once it shifts direction, becomes a weapon sharper than any blade. The story didn't explode all at once. It leaked, drop by poisonous drop. And each drop corroded the mask my parents had built. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. Family blames teen for crash. But sealed report tells a different story. My name wasn't in the headline. But everyone in town could read between the lines. They knew. They whispered. They stared when I walked through the diner doors. But for the first time, their stares weren't daggers aimed at me. They were aimed at them. By noon, Chloe's Instagram was a battlefield. Strangers demanded answers. Sponsors pulled their contracts. Comments once full of admiration now burned with disgust. "So you lied? Did you let your sister take the fall?" She deleted her posts one by one, but screenshots multiplied faster than her shame. My father stormed into the diner that night, red-faced and trembling. He cornered me by the register, spitting threats about lawyers and family loyalty. Customers froze, forks halfway to their mouths, as his voice cracked like glass. I looked him dead in the eye. 9 years you stole from me. You should pray the truth is all I take." He left without paying for his coffee. At home, my mother tried a different tactic: tears. She sobbed on the couch, clutching at me with trembling hands. "Emily, we only wanted to protect Chloe. Don't destroy us over one mistake." "One mistake?" My voice shook, but not with weakness. 9 years of mistakes. And every single one had my name carved into it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally being free. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of the house. For years, those sounds had made me feel trapped. Now they sounded like the groaning of an empire collapsing. But revenge is never clean. Chloe cornered me the next morning, her face pale, her voice raw. "You think people will forgive you for this? They'll hate you for exposing us." I smiled, bitter and sharp. "They already hated me, Chloe. For something I never did. Now it's your turn." She didn't speak after that. She just stared at me, trembling, not with anger, but with the realization that the world she'd built on my back was crumbling. And I knew then, I wasn't just taking back my life. I was dismantling theirs, brick by brick, until nothing was left but truth. They thought the worst that could happen was gossip. They underestimated how tidy a life built on lies becomes when you start pulling threads. I moved like a surgeon. I handed copies of the report to the paper's editor, the lawyer who'd once freelanced for the diner, the PTA president who'd baked my mother casseroles. I sat across from each person and said 2 words: "Read this." They read. Their faces changed in ways I'd memorized, first confusion, then the slow, cold arithmetic of betrayal. The lawyer I'd contacted pro bono didn't want money. She wanted justice. She pulled financial records, traced the medical transfers to accounts my parents controlled, and found a web of reimbursements filed under Chloe's name that had never funded a single hospital bill. Fraud isn't poetic, but it is effective. She drafted letters that smelled of subpoenas and consequence. Then I released the audio. I'd recorded a birthday dinner years earlier, my father drunk, my mother whispering, Chloe laughing, as they rehearsed the version of the crash I was supposed to swallow. I edited it down to the essential confessions, the unconscious admissions that meant everything. I didn't smear them with rage. I let their own voices do the work. I uploaded the clip with a brief caption, "Sealed report contradicts this." Within hours, it leaked into group chats and comment threads. Into the mouths of neighbors who had once nodded along at barbecues. Chloe tried to throttle me with please. Please, she begged in my driveway, voice ragged, this will ruin everything. Her hands were small and trembling. I watched the girl who'd stolen my adolescence crumble into a kid who couldn't remember how to lie convincingly. My father lost his job that week. A background check pulled up the article. His employer, a company that traded on reputation, let him go before lunch. He packed a bag with stiff hands and no speech. My mother's church committee called an emergency meeting and, after hours of whispered testimonies, voted to remove her from the board. They told her it was for the good of the congregation. It was exile in daylight. People I'd once feared now offered apologies that tasted like late rain. Some were small, awkward, and sincere. Others were thin and self-serving. I collected them like evidence, not bomb. The collapse was not violent. It was the quiet arithmetic of truth doing its simple, relentless work. Money stopped flowing into their accounts. Invitations stopped arriving. Chloe's phone filled with messages that demanded answers she could no longer avoid, and when she finally stood in front of the same small crowd that had once pitted her, voice barely a thread, and told the truth, not polished, not performative, just raw, something shifted. The town inhaled and the lie exhaled. I watched her confess and felt the strangest thing, a hollow, as if the space they'd stolen from me was finally mine to occupy. I clenched my hands until my knuckles white, and instead of relief, I felt a curious, aching lightness. I had dismantled them, piece by piece. But in the rubble, I discovered what revenge often forgets to give, the permission to rebuild. The realization arrived like dawn, cold, inevitable, and mercilessly beautiful. The night the last domino fell, the house was silent. No shouting. No clinking glasses. Just silence so thick it felt like smoke in my lungs. Chloe had confessed publicly, the lawyer had filed charges for fraud. And my parents, those two towering figures who once dictated every breath I took, sat at the kitchen table like statues. Their empire of lies was ashed out. I stood in the doorway, the folder in my hands one last time. That manila file, once a prison sentence, was now nothing more than paper. I placed it on the table between us. You stole 9 years, I said softly. 9 years you can't give back. My father didn't look up. His hands trembled on the wood grain. My mother's mascara had carved rivers down her face. Chloe's eyes were swollen, her voice gone. They didn't fight anymore. They didn't beg. They simply sat in the ruins they'd made, and for the first time in almost a decade, I felt taller than all of them. I walked out of that house with nothing, no bag. No savings left from the theft, no apology ringing in my ears. But my steps were light. Because the weight wasn't mine anymore. I had laid it down in front of them, where it belonged. The world didn't hand me justice. I carved it out with my own 2 hands. Piece by piece, truth by truth, until the cage they built around me collapsed on them instead, and when I finally stood alone under the streetlight, breathing air that tasted of freedom, I whispered the title of my story. The one that would outlive their lies forever. My parents blamed me for my sister's accident for 9 years, until I found the real police report.